going on?
Sanders, what's going on? It's Mega Maid. She's gone from suck to blow.
What? They're getting all their air back. Do something.
Do something. Do something.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and while for the most part I would suggest people stay away from Bleeding Cool, they do have a few creators there that do good work. I like the current comic reviewer that they have. I think his name is Hannibal something. But there's another newsletter they kind of do weekly called Comic Store in Your Future from Rob Lamberti. He's a comic retailer in Iowa. It's usually got some pretty good information in there. And this week he wrote one kind of asking, where the hell is Marvel? What is Marvel doing? And here with me to talk about that is the X-Men historian, the Marvel aficionado himself. Doc, how you doing?
I am great, sir. Thank you for having me on to talk about this. I generally don't, like most people, I try to avoid Bleeding Cool because I don't want it to give my computer, herpes. I kind of mentally check out on anything that Bleeding Cool publishes. And because I think Rich Johnson's a douche. But you know what? When you forwarded me this article, I was like, holy crap, they're actually putting out some content and some thoughts and articles worth a damn. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking about this particular article.
If people are interested to read the whole thing and see what Rod had to say specifically, there is a link in the video description. I definitely suggest you check it out. So he goes into this. He's saying, hey, we just had Berserker from Boom Studios, 300,000, 600,000 comics shipped. I guess it sold very well. Before that, the last big seller was TMNT, The Last Ronin. Obviously, I think that one was like at 160, 180, something like that. That was an $8 comic book. He sold a lot of those. He said before that, it was Batman 3 Jokers. Obviously, that was a DC book that a lot of people were looking forward to. And his question is, where the hell is Marvel? Where's their big titles? Where's their big breakout sellers? And he had to go all the way back to House of X Powers of 10 for the last time Marvel had a really big hit on their hands. I don't know, Doc, does that sound about right to you? Obviously we had Absolute Carnage in there, which I liked. It was about the same time as House of X Powers of 10, but King in Black was the sequel to that. And I think that if they had left Absolute Carnage in the pages of Venom, rather than making it an event that didn't really conclude with anything, no resolution, leading into King in Black, if they'd just done the King in Black as an event, it would have been more successful.
I think you're right. One of the problems that I've voiced in the past was taking the payoff from long-running subplots and plots in books and taking it out of that title and making it into an event is you exacerbate. There's already event fatigue in readers throughout the world, but you're exacerbating it by making essentially non-events into events. And just
like War of the Realms from Thor was like the payoff to Jason Aaron's enormous run on Thor. Not everybody liked it, but taking it out of there, you didn't get the payoff in the series, and then it kind of just watered down what he was trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. Empire, if they were going to do that crossover, that should have just been like 8 issues back and forth, like 4 and 4 of Avengers and Fantastic Four, rather than its own event. That's what we used to do, and I think that's more effective. And that way, whenever you do get around to doing events that are going to be a little more global in scale or even impactful, it makes it something a little more special. I think they blew their load on Absolute Carnage. So whenever it came around to King in Black, everybody's like, oh, it's just Absolute Carnage again, instead of it being a bigger thing. Because now that you're putting those two events essentially equal in the eyes of the viewer, because you made them equal in the eyes of yourselves. Whatever you sell it as is the way that they're going to see it. That you sold it Absolute Carnage as an event, then you sell King in Black as an event. People look at them as equal in scope when they're not. So yeah,
King in Black is much bigger, has bigger application or implications. They're both really good though. I enjoyed both of them quite a bit. I was let down by the ending of Absolute Carnage, where King in Black was a different story. He did miss one thing. There was one comic from Marvel that was an enormous hit. I don't know that they actually. Well, I guess there's been two. One of them was that first issue of what is it, High Republic Star Wars.
Yeah,
that one shipped a lot of comics, but also the first issue of Alien also shipped, I think, what was like 300,000. It's the second highest shipped comic of 2021 so far. It was actually did very well, but those aren't exactly Marvel superheroes. You know, they do have the Star Wars line, but it feels, from what I understand, that High Republic thing just died immediately. It was all speculators coming in because it was a new like corner of the Star Wars universe. So they didn't exactly draw people in to continue on reading.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can kind of wash High Republic out of this conversation. I think that there was the opportunity that they could have really leaned into Immortal Hulk whenever it was when it hit its high point, about 18 months ago. And they could have really carried that momentum forward. But then Al Ewing decided to Al Ewing it. Between that and the shipping becoming a little more wonky on it, a lot of the momentum was pulled out of there. But so yeah, you're right. There's not, Marvel has been essentially asleep at the wheel, and the thing is, a lot of they're putting out these events. They've done Iron Man 2020. They've done Empire. They've done War of the Realms. They've done King in Black, Outlawed. And they're doing them all simultaneously or one and then there's
hey, listen, in June, Hellfire Gala, you got the War of Bounty Hunters, you got Infinite Destinies, and you got Heroes Reborn. 4 events. And you have a big title on Amazing Spider-Man where they're shipping it weekly with a giant size issue as well.
Yeah.
Might as well be 5 events.
Yeah. People get overwhelmed by them. They just end up kind of tuning them out.
How's it never going to feel special if it's not sitting out there in bright lights and you can put all your marketing to it? If you have 5 events in 1 month, how can anything ever stand out as important?
Well, I mean, if everything's special, nothing's special. That's, I think, the lesson we can learn from Marvel at this point. They've made everything need to be special, and as a result, nothing is special anymore. King in Black could have been enormous, but they would have needed to do a little more planning. They had been building it for like 3 years on Donny Cates' Venom. All they needed to do was figure out what the month was going to be, what the issues were going to be, and tell everybody, every other creator that's working in their line, they could have had a 1-issue tie-in inside their own book. Like Captain America played a big role in King in Black. Spider-Man plays a big role in King in Black. Iron Man, Thor, Silver Surfer. Well, there's not a Silver Surfer book right now, but all of these characters played big roles, and all they needed was 1 or 2 issues of tie-in. Because if you look at King in Black, when the fuck does it happen? Like there's no impact.
It kind of started at the same time as Ten of Swords, right?
Yeah,
on?
But there's no you're not seeing it reflected in a single other book.
Daredevil, Venom, those are the 2 that I read that it was happening in there. But the weird thing is, if you're reading Daredevil, it's over.
Yeah,
it was over weeks before it actually ended.
Yeah,
so that made it confusing as well.
Instead of doing that, they're releasing all these little one-shots and mini-series spin-off books, but nobody gives a shit about them. Like, they don't sell. Like, I get it. For a long time, people used to bitch about, I don't like my book that I'm reading, Thor, being interrupted by Fall of the Mutants over in, all the X books. Why does it need to be connected? Why does Inferno need to cross over into Web of Spider-Man? I guess this is their way of, still doing those tie-ins without
getting number 1 issues out of it.
Well, they're getting number one issues. They're doing the tie-ins, but they're also not pissing off the people that are reading the monthly title. But the result is that it
They don't
feels
feel
like
important, and normally they have a substandard creative team.
yes,
So it's basically Joe who gives a fuck, as the writer and the artist on it. And you're like, why is this even costing $5? Because it's part of the event. It's got to be expensive.
yeah. Nobody cares. And these books, I mean, you can walk into, I mean, I know some people there's still some people that go all in on events and buy every single spinoff and they were doing it with Empire. They did it with War of the Realms. They did it with Absolute Carnage, and they're doing it with King in Black. I get it. There's always going to be those people, but it seems like that audience, and at least from this retail, at least from this retailer's experience, it's fewer and fewer with every one, and there's no real draw to it anymore. Because if everything's special, nothing's special. I think that's Marvel marketing and sales in a nutshell.
Well, let's talk about Empire. At the end of Empire, you had this, big, conflict. You had the Kakati and the Kree Scroll War, stuff they've been talking about for like 50, 60 years in Marvel Comics. It should feel like a big deal. When it was over, what changed about the Marvel Universe?
Nothing.
What was the impact?
Nothing.
Whereas in King in Black, it feels like there are some changes. Venom himself has certainly changed in his place in the Marvel Universe. But if you read Empire, you read Iron Man 2020, you read some of these events up here, like it doesn't matter. Nothing's going to happen. So when something actually does happen where the status quo might actually change and things are going to be impacted, you miss it because it's just the same thing as everything else, right?
Yeah. I mean, at least when they did Secret Invasion, that it was followed up by Dark Reign and there was some fallout. When they did Civil War, it was followed up by the Initiative. But when they did Civil War 2, there was nothing. When they did Axis, there was nothing. I mean, hell, even Secret War, honestly, other than shoving a bunch of alternate universe characters into the 616, it's been no different.
That changes things.
Yeah, but barely. Okay, we got a bunch of new heroes that don't belong, but they're also not important ones. Yeah. Sorry, Miles and Spider-Gwen aren't important.
I think Marvel would disagree with you on that one. Miles Morales has the potential to be one of the best-selling, or just as far as money makers outside of comics that they have.
He's black and red instead of blue and red Spider-Man.
He's also had a successful animated movie, and he's had a successful video game adapted to him.
But his comics still don't sell.
I said outside of comics.
Okay, yeah. I mean, my point is, inside the comic universe, none of that mattered. Because Miles being in the 616 doesn't matter. Nobody cares. And
I think people prefer that character not to be in the 616.
I think so too. I think same with
Spider-Man. Better character when he was the Spider-Man of his own universe. Yes. Now that he's in here and he's overshadowed by Peter Parker, he's insignificant in the big scheme of things. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So there's no real fallout from any of these events, and people just kind of start tuning them out. You have too many that are
have Marvel Comics trained their own customers to not pay attention to what they're saying is important?
I think so. I think they did that a long time ago, though. First, they started training people by making nothing that happened in the events actually have fallout. And then they trained them to not even to be able to ignore them by moving all of the tie-ins out of the main titles. And then they trained them to just ignore them completely because there's 7 of them going on at once and you can't pay attention to them. So you only pay attention to the ones that, this is the law of unintended consequences kicking Marvel in the ass. They're like, okay, well, we're going to try this thing. And then the consequences are people stop caring.
Yeah, that's why they have to publish, 100, 120 comic books in a month to maintain their position as the market leader.
True, absolutely correct. If they didn't do that, if they had a manageable line, they'd be it'd be very, very close. It'd be a pretty dead heat between the two. Because this retailer though, he also talks about new books that are being released. Even some of the popular or anticipated titles like Geiger, and I think he was talking about Noctera as well. These creator-owned books. Well, apparently, the industry decided, or their publishers decided, to release the regular cover this week, even though they still had the same final order cutoff, and they still were solicited together. The glow in the dark covers for both of these aren't being released until weeks later. Now, it could be it is, but you know what? What I would recommend to any retailers, double check, and even if they have the same final order cutoffs, they're solicited together, is if you can order them independently and one is shipping weeks later, treat it like it's a second print. There's a lot of these things that are coming out. Like there was a foil berserker book that came weeks later. You got a lot of creators out there, or in a lot of publishers that seem like they've failed basic consumer psychology 101, or they've just decided that consumer psychology doesn't matter. I can't decide which one. I mean, Marvel, it's pretty clear they've decided that it doesn't matter. But for smaller publishers, if you release cover A 1 week and then it's going to be 3 weeks later for cover B for the same issue, do you really think you're going to have the same demand for it? When placed side by side, absolutely you could talk about the demand between the two. But when you're looking weeks later to a guy walking by the shelf going, "Wait, didn't I already buy this?" And
or you put it on your pull list. Yeah, I wanted that glow in the dark cover that you said it was available. The comic book's out this week. Where is it? Well, it'll be here in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Do I really want to wait? We'll take that off my pull.
Yeah.
Well, I already ordered it for you. Well, I didn't know it wasn't going to be here today.
Yeah. And I'll just go buy the A cover that's on the shelf.
Yeah.
And then you end up with a lot of stuff just sitting there. And I think this is another thing with comic shops that they need to it's not just looking at what is selling and what isn't, what has hype and what isn't, and buying in on that. You got to start looking at the consumer psychology of your customers in your ordering.
Well, it all depends on the customer. I'm sure the retailers probably know their customers best. Like who buys everything, who's more interested in the mainline stuff.
But they can see, I mean, you see this particular retailer, he's talking about how the fact that a lot of these tie-ins, they're just sitting on the shelf. They're not selling anymore. And I think Marvel, DC, but in this case, it is Marvel. They need to reevaluate how they're publishing.
They do.
Because
they definitely do. They need to look at how they're servicing their customers, because it feels like they're turning people off. They haven't had a big hit in a long time. When was House of X Powers of 10? Like, is that October 2019?
No, it was earlier than that. It was August of 2019.
August. Yeah, okay. August to about October.
Yeah. You're looking at almost, you're looking at 20 months now since the last time they had a legitimate hit. Like a legitimate, like, bring people in. Oh shit, everybody's buying this. I need to get on this train. Hit. Using their current formula, they're not going to have one. You know, how Heroes Reborn is ignored. Nobody cares about it. Everybody forgot Outlawed even was happening. Is it still happening? I don't know.
I think it's still happening.
Okay. The upcoming Spider event, there's no hype behind it. When Hunted started, there was a little bit of hype behind it. Before that, it was oh God, what was the Clone Conspiracy right at the end of Slot's run? You know, these Spider events aren't really they're not what they were 10 years ago. They're not drawing new readers the way they were 10 years ago.
Yeah,
Marvel
I
is
really
not
liked
publishing.
the was it Last Remains story arc, but it forgot to end, and then I didn't like it anymore. It was like, oh,
Yeah.
it's just a blip within the run. There's no beginning, middle, and end to it. It just happened.
Last Remains was good, and then Last Remains, but it didn't end, and then you're like, oh, Last Remains postmortem. Okay, cool. We'll get the finale in that, and then that was 2 issues, and then it jumped into the negative space thing, and you're like, wait, what?
I don't know. I dropped Amazing Spider-Man. I have no intentions of picking it back up. It's going to take a lot for me to jump back on the train because I feel like Nick Spencer and Marvel Comics are slow rolling me on this on that damn story, but that is not what this video is about. We got to wrap this up, Doc. We've been talking about this Marvel issue for a while, but they need a big hit. They need to change something because Boom's got big hits. IDW's got big hits. Image has big hits. DC has big hits. Marvel doesn't have big hits right now, and that's a problem.
It is. I think they're banking on this Boba Fett thing in the summer to be a big hit, but I don't see it happening.
It's not connecting into the Mandalorian universe.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so if you're trying to get sales off of that, you did it wrong.
Yeah, they should be tying into the stuff that they're creating or on Disney Plus that people are actually enjoying. So, Doc, thank you so much for giving me your perspective. You are the Marvel aficionado and the X-Men historian, and I will talk to you later, my good friend.
Thank you, sir.